So tons of people have prediabetes, many people, and you may be one of them if you're watching this video. But I would guess, based on some statistics I saw, I would guess it's something like about a third of the adults in the United States probably have prediabetes. And if you hear prediabetes, maybe you think, that doesn't sound that serious. It's just pre-diabetes. So I don't even have diabetes yet. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you're already at an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes and lots of other deadly or dangerous health problems. And you're obviously at an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. If you don't do anything about it, you're probably going to develop type 2 diabetes. And once that happens, there are tons of ugly complications that are basically inevitable unless you do something about it. So if you just kind of keep doing what you're doing, it's probably not going to end well. The good news is prediabetes is fully reversible, and it's actually relatively easy because you're probably not on much medication for it, if any, and you probably don't have any of those full-blown complications, the ones that are like completely irreversible that I'm going to mention later in the video. So in this video, I'll explain several symptoms and complications that can come along with prediabetes so you can get a better understanding of how it works and kind of also be motivated to make a change. And also I'll give you an overview of how to reverse prediabetes. So let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to mention 10 different symptoms or complications of prediabetes, and I'll divide them into two broad categories, 5 each. So the first category is things related to insulin resistance, and the second one is things related to type 2 diabetes itself, complications of it that you may have like an earlier version of right now. So first, let's talk about insulin resistance. Just in case you don't know, insulin is a hormone that comes from your pancreas. Your pancreas pumps it out into your bloodstream whenever you eat carbs like sugar, starch, anything that has those kind of things in it. Bread, pasta, rice, soda, juice, etc., etc. So the problem that comes up a lot is that if you're eating a lot of sugar and starch and all these different types of carbohydrates all the time, your pancreas is constantly pumping out insulin. And after a while, your body says, that's too much insulin. I can't handle all that insulin. So it has to turn down the response. So that's a normal biological thing your body does whenever there's too much of a certain hormone. It turns down the response. So that's resistance, insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance is basically the underlying cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So it's important to know about. Now, what are some of the signs of insulin resistance that you could kind of keep an eye out for to help you know that you're having this type of problem? Well, one of them is excess belly fat. So that's a very common sign of having insulin resistance and often comes along with prediabetes as a result. So that's something you can probably recognize pretty quickly. Do you have a disproportionate amount of belly fat in particular? The next one is high blood pressure. Most people that have high blood pressure probably have insulin resistance because that's a major cause of high blood pressure. And that's because high insulin or insulin resistance causes you to retain water and retain salt. It affects how your kidneys work. So that's the second one, is high blood pressure. Another one is really obvious, and that is high blood sugar. So of course that's usually how prediabetes is diagnosed, is by checking your blood sugar. And so if you have like a fasting blood sugar that's a little bit too high, but not all the way too high, they call that prediabetes. So it's kind of an arbitrary scale, but the high blood sugar usually means you have insulin resistance, almost always, in fact. So that's the third one. The next one would be migraines. So this is not quite as common as the other 3 that I mentioned, but migraines are often caused by insulin resistance because there's some different changes in how things move around and the pressure in the brain and all this stuff with the insulin resistance. So if you do have migraines, that there's a higher chance that you also have the insulin resistance that may be causing your pre-diabetes. And then another one, the 5th one I'll mention about insulin resistance, is infertility. So people with infertility, it's often related to insulin resistance because Insulin resistance is basically the cause of PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is, I think it's the most common cause of infertility in women. And then insulin resistance also contributes to having like low testosterone levels in some men. So that could be related as well. So those are several things to look for related to insulin resistance. So that was the first broad category. So the other broad category of what to look for is everything that comes along with type 2 diabetes. Maybe you're having an early version of some of these things, or maybe you're a little closer to having type 2 diabetes than you realize. So here are 5 things to watch for related to type 2 diabetes itself that may be a sign that you have not only that you have prediabetes, but that it may be more advanced than you think. So the first one is vision problems. So not to be confused with, as we get older into middle age, sometimes we need reading glasses, and that's normal. But intermittent blurred vision is often associated with diabetes. And so if you're getting that, you may already have a little bit more advanced case of prediabetes. Chronic kidney disease is another one. So that means if your kidneys are just kind of gradually getting worse, if this is 100% function and then it's gradually going down, because that's kind of how we measure it. We talk about like what percentage of kidney function you have. So if it's gradually getting worse, that's probably a sign that you not only have prediabetes, but it may be somewhat advanced. Another one would be like tingling or numbness in your feet, your legs, maybe your hands. Because if you have type 2 diabetes, you often end up getting neuropathy, which causes pain and tingling and numbness in your feet and other parts of your extremities. So you might notice that early on with prediabetes. And then two more. So another one would be if you have wounds, open sores that aren't healing very quickly, and or you get infections that don't go away very easily, because those two things go together a lot. So the poor healing wounds and the frequent infections. And then the fifth one related to diabetes and prediabetes is heart problems. So once you have type 2 diabetes, you're at a much higher risk of heart attacks and other heart problems. And the same is true, just to a somewhat lesser extent, with prediabetes. So if you're already experiencing some heart-related problems and you've either been diagnosed with prediabetes or you think you might have it, then that's a sign that maybe it's more advanced or more serious than you previously thought. So now that we've gone through a bunch of signs and symptoms related to prediabetes to help you understand it and to help you maybe get a kick in the pants to get a little more motivated to do something about it so you don't end up with these even more serious problems, let me give you an overview of how to fix it. Like I said earlier, it's actually relatively easy. Sure, there's some growing pains if you change any habit, like people don't like changing their eating habits and people don't like changing their daily routine and all that. So obviously you got to make some changes if you're going to fix it. But within, compared to like fixing diabetes and compared to a lot of other health problems, it's relatively easy to fix. And here's basically how you fix it. So the main cause of insulin resistance is eating too much sugar and starch. So I'll give you a wild guess. How do you fix, what do you do differently to fix it in that case? You cut out the sugar and the starch, at least most of it, at least for a while, and at least the most processed varieties. So if you try your darndest to avoid processed sugar, processed carbs, refined carbohydrates, like the white bread, most types of pasta, potato products, anything else that's starchy like rice, also any sugary drinks are a big culprit as well. So it's a longer list than that. I'm just listing off some of the most common things, and sweets and treats, desserts and all that. Anything made with flour or starch or what have you, grains and starches. So if you avoid the refined varieties of those, or even go full board and avoid all of them for a while, like a low carb diet, which is sometimes called a ketogenic diet, chances are that alone could fix your prediabetes by fixing your insulin resistance. So that's something to strongly consider if you're trying to fix prediabetes. So I won't get into all the details here, but like I said, I'm just giving you an overview. Another thing that helps a lot with fixing prediabetes is fasting. So fasting or intermittent fasting. Whether you do the short daily fasts or occasionally do a little bit longer fast, like 24 hours or 36 hours, which is like a whole day, that is often very effective at rapidly improving insulin resistance and blood sugar and prediabetes. So that could be done in combination with a lower carbohydrate diet, or at least cutting out some of the processed foods, and that would make it even more effective. And those are the two biggest things that probably help the most. But as a little bonus, here are 3 other things that can definitely help with reversing prediabetes. One is exercise, because whenever you exercise, you're kind of helping normalize your blood sugar, because your muscles take up a lot of the extra sugar and things like that. So that can certainly help, and it helps lower insulin and kind of just helps reduce the insulin resistance overall. And 2 others are if you improve your sleep quality, because when you don't sleep well, your blood sugar will be higher. So if anything you can do to improve your sleep quality, like avoid social media at night or sleep in a colder room, would be 2 examples, then you're probably going to have better blood sugar and less likely to have prediabetes or diabetes. Another one is kind of lowering your stress levels. Again, that's like easier said than done. Similar to sleep, it's easier said than done, but just FYI, it is connected to your blood sugar and diabetes. If your stress is high, your blood sugar is also high, because that's just kind of how your body reacts to stress. So those are a bunch of things you can do to help get rid of prediabetes. Like I said, it's relatively easy. And one of the 2 most impactful ones is fasting. And so if you want to know how to get started with fasting in an easy 2-step process, then I have a video right here that walks you through how to do that. And if you want to understand a little bit more about diabetes complications and how to avoid them, then I have a video right here that talks about some of the worst diabetes complications, kind of what they do, and how you can potentially avoid them through fasting and nutrition. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.